What's going on, guys? Got another video for y'all coming out. And today we're going to talk about making money the old school way. Real estate. Real estate. Now, I have knowledge of real estate because back in 2015, when my grandfather died, when he first moved here, he moved here like 6 months after I was born. And he died when I was 16. No, I'm sorry. He died when I was 17. Like I said, he moved here right after I was born. So the house he got hadn't quite been paid off. It still had about 6 years left on it. 5 years and some change, right? So when he died, obviously me and my mother were in charge of the house. He left everything to us. She was his only child, and I was his only grandchild, of course. And so everything was left to us. And, me and my mom sat down, we discussed it, and we decided that it would be best to rent out the property and get that mortgage paid for until it's actually paid off, and then let them, whoever was renting out the property, allow them to own the property after they pay the mortgage off, right? So, that was my first introduction to the real estate game, and I'm still doing it now. I still receive monthly payments from that. And it's not much because the mortgage wasn't anything, and we upped the price a little bit so you can receive a little bit of a profit, which I'm gonna discuss in a minute. But that was when I first really got interested into it, and I realized how easy it was and how simple it can really be if you just almost, everything I get into, I try to look for the easy way and then the fundamental textbook way, which are oftentimes two different things. And when you read these books and you go to these seminars, classes, whatever the case may be, they're not going to tell you just a really simple way to get to be successful and stay successful in real estate. So I'm gonna break it down for y'all today, hopefully in under 10 minutes. Now, obviously, there's a lot of steps to become successful in real estate, but the first step is also the hardest step. And that first step is saving up, or just actually taking the time to invest that first amount of money to get that very first property, to make that down payment on that first property. Because what we're going to do, the easiest way to be successful in real estate is just to own properties and rent them out. You can become a real estate agent if that's what you want. You could be a real estate broker, which is people who basically manage those agents. They basically own the agency that these agents work for. But in my opinion, the best possible way to make a profit and have sustainable income through real estate is just to get a property, own it, and rent it out until it's paid for. So that's the very first hard part, because let's say you want to buy, let's just say an average house, $100,000, depending on where you live. I live in the South, so houses are a little bit cheaper. But just the average house, $100,000. It's really more than that, but let's just say $100,000 just to make everything simple. And let's say you have average credit and everything, you need to put down 20% in order to get that down payment on that house. Well, that's $20,000 that you got to put down for that house. That's a considerable amount of money if you're starting off and you don't really have that much disposable income. You know what I mean? So that's a really hard part. That's the very first hard part that, and I could talk about other videos on how to other ways to make money. But as far as real estate is concerned, you're gonna need enough money for that very first down payment on that very first property. If you don't have that, well then it's really nothing you can do. Even if you're getting a house that's $50,000, 20% of that is still $10,000. Depending on your current situation, that's still a considerable amount of money, depending on who you are. So, that's the very first step. But after you complete that very first step, it's pretty much smooth sailing from there on out. So go back to that original number of $100,000. You put down $20,000. So that means there's $80,000 left on that mortgage payment. The entire house, the value of the house is $100,000, okay? You already put down $20,000. You have to pay the rest of that to own that house. After all of that is paid through monthly payments, with interest rates and all of that, because most people get loans, blah 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 blah. But after all of that is paid off, you now own that house. That's what everybody pays. That's their mortgage payment. You're paying that house off. and it usually takes 20 to shit somewhere all the way up to 40 years. But after that time, you own that house. So what you want to do is, after you get that very first down payment, and that house, all the documentation is in your name, you don't own it yet, but you're paying it off to own. You're paying that mortgage to own the house. You rent that house out, and you get that monthly mortgage payment paid by somebody else. So if you have a house somewhere, like I said, it's $100,000 house, you've already put 20,000 down. You want to find some sort of tenant or tenants, plural, to help pay that mortgage off while you stay somewhere else and you just manage that property. You're a landlord. That's basically what you're doing. You're a landlord. It could be an apartment, it could be a condo, a house, a townhouse, whatever the case may be. But you're paying off that property with their money. And the best possible situation is to actually have, which just makes logical sense if you're trying to make money from this, you want that mortgage payment that they're making, you want it to be higher than what you actually owe. So if you have a $500 a month mortgage payment, you don't want to charge them $500 a month. That's pointless. What you want to do is charge $600, $700, anywhere up to $1,000 or even more if you can. You want to charge as much possible money as you can for that mortgage payment each month by that tenant, so that you receive more income. And once you receive more income, you can get another house, another property, another apartment, whatever the case may be. And it's just a recurring process. You keep doing it and keep doing it. And that's just the simplest way to make money off of real estate. Now, in order to, now after that first property, because as you guys know, the stock market and the real estate market, everything goes up and down. It fluctuates. Of course, everything went down with the recession, like in '08. Back in the Great Depression, back in the '30s, everything was dirt cheap. But there's usually, if the economy is fairly stable, it fluctuates. It goes up, it goes down. Sometimes it slowly increases, and sometimes it slowly decreases. You're going to have times where it just drops down. You're going to have times where it shoots up. But usually it's, if you look at a graph, it just kind of goes up and down as the years go on. But when that value goes up, which most of the time it usually will if you're in a fairly stable neighborhood, once that value goes up on your house or any house that you're owning, whether or not it's the real estate investment house, or just the house you already live in, you have what's called equity. Equity is synonymous with value. When the real estate market goes up, so does the value of your house. So, just going back to that $100,000 number, if that's what you pay for the house that you're currently living in, or your parents, or whatever the case may be, once the value of that house doubles, for example, the real estate market doubles, which doesn't really happen anymore, but just for the sake of this argument, it goes up $100,000. Now the house is worth $200,000. That means you have $100,000 equity sitting on that house. That's what that house is worth. You can take that $100,000 and you can take out an equity loan. You get that money, you can loan it, the bank will loan it out, and you can take up to 80% of that equity loan. So your original house was $100,000. It doubled, so now you have $200,000, and you can take out 80%. You can take out 80% of that loan, or of what that equity is now, what it's now at. So now your house has doubled. You could take out 80% of that $100,000. So now you have another $80,000 that you can take to do whatever you want to do with it. You can use that money to be the next down payment or on another property, so that you can just keep doing that same process over and over and over. And if you do everything right, you'll be able to pay that loan back off, and you can just keep doing this over and over. And it's just a recurring process. You get the original money, whether it's through equity loans or just coming out of your own pocket. You get a property, you find tenants, and you repeat. And the cool thing about real estate is, it's pretty much as long as you pay attention to the market, there's really no downside. There's no reason to why you can't find somebody to rent out that apartment. There's certain apartments, there's certain parts of town. For example, I live in Buckhead, Atlanta. Buckhead's always going to be somewhat of a luxurious area. You know what I mean? It's always going to be an affluent area. It's been that way since, pretty much since Atlanta's been Atlanta. You know what I mean? So finding a house here isn't really a bad investment as long as it's somewhat of a decent house. You know what you're doing, and the market just doesn't drop, which I don't really see that happening anytime soon. It's actually increasing. And I'm going to talk about that in another video. The economy's coming back again. So Real estate is actually a pretty good investment. Like I said, the only downside is finding that original sum of money so that you can get that very first property. And also managing is really, really, really tiring. Which if you have one or two properties, I mean, really, even for that first property, you want to try to find, you want to endeavor to try to find a manager, um, for those properties because every time something goes on, like just for example, the apartment I'm living in right now, there's been certain little problems that weren't addressed when I first moved in. I didn't know they were here. So when you got to call the landlord and the landlord has to come and look at it, they have to call a repairman and all of that. All of that's going to be you once you buy that very first property and get some tenants in it. So it's going to be more lucrative for you just to actually get a manager and pay them the little 8% or whatever percentage that you guys agree on so that you can just relax and let somebody handle that business or handle those properties or just properties singular for you. Like I said, it's usually about 8%. That's usually the going rate, 7 to 10%, usually around 8 or 9. And once you have that, they get a percentage of whatever that profit that you make is, and then that's it. They'll email you every month. They'll send the money to you. They'll tell you if anything needs to be handled. But other than that, it's smooth sailing. Um, but you don't want to have a property and every time something little bitty thing goes wrong, you have to get called and you have to come out of pocket and drop 30,000, drop 15,000, drop 5,000. After a while, it's just going to become a headache. It's going to become just a nightmare of an investment. So like I said, get that very first amount of money so that you can get the property, buy the property, hopefully try to get equity or just make enough money to get a second property. Keep repeating that process until you have enough money, enough disposable income to get a manager, pay that manager whatever percentage you guys agree on, and smooth sail. And then, like I said, the cool thing about it is you do that all the way until the mortgages are paid off in those houses. So now you have a property in Miami. Now you got a property in Houston. Now you got a property in St. Louis, Chicago, Seattle, whatever the